Brent, most of the time when we have these Zooms, everybody comes on muted. So let's just go ahead and get started. You guys, I met Brent a few years ago, Brent Swander, when Brian, Jody Beekman, Coretta, myself, Lori, we were all at Leadership Academy. And he just really talked to us a lot about government and about the affairs that go on and what they really do to protect Columbus Realtors. And we really wanted him to be on today to just tell us a little bit about what's going on, what we need to know. And Brent, if you want to go ahead, I'll go ahead and mute myself. If anybody has questions, please put them in the chat box and we can finish at the very end and we'll ask the questions. So thanks, Brent, for being on.
Of course. Thanks, Holly. I know most of you, which is great. So thanks for having me, first of all. I will kind of do what I normally do and kind of go local, state, and federal issues, and then talk a little bit about CORPAC and the politics of what's going on. So on a local level, I do want to talk about the Franklin County second half tax payments. So I know that we have more than just Franklin County, but in Franklin County, we've been engaged in a lot of conversations with the auditor. I do want to take the opportunity, and I should start with this, in talking about what we do as an association. So I'm gonna take a step back. So our advocacy efforts have been critical from a local, state, and federal level. Sue, you know this from your work at NAR and everything that NAR is doing. Throughout my 7 years, yes, I'm hitting 7 years with Columbus Realtors, which does not seem real. From time to time, you hear, what is the value of the association? Or we know what Columbus does. What does Ohio do? But more importantly, what does NAR do? If there has ever been a time that the three-way agreement between the local, state, and national associations have been beneficial, the work that our office and John Yeehaw, our new CEO, and the state and federal, and the teams collectively working together for the betterment of our industry, you all as members and the consumers, is unprecedented. There's a ton of work that has gone into what has happened over the last month and a half. I am literally, and we all are, on calls with local and public officials every day. They want to know what's going on in the market. They want to know what's going on the streets with our members, showing houses, how you all are doing financially, mentally, physically, emotionally. They care. I've talked to all three Franklin County commissioners. I've talked to 2 of the 3 in Delaware County. City attorneys, city managers, mayors, everyone. They are all curious in reaching out to our association. I think that's a testament to, and I've talked to 2 of our 3 members of Congress as well. I think that's a testament to the relationships that our association has been able to build over many, 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 many years. So they are talking to us because they want to know what's going on, and they genuinely do care in terms of not only emotional, financial, physical, mental, but just in terms of how everyone is doing and what they can be doing to better assist us, our association, our members, and consumers. So one of the early conversations that we had with Franklin County was the delay of second half tax payments. There is some authority by the county treasurers to delay tax payments up to 30 days. And then once you get past 30 days, it's my understanding that it actually requires the auditor to sign off. And then I think it's after 45 days, it actually requires the state of Ohio to sign off. Cheryl Brooks Sullivan and Treasurer Cheryl Brooks Sullivan and Auditor Cinciano actually sent a letter to the state asking for a 60-day delay in second half tax payments. There was quite a bit of pushback by townships and some school districts who were set to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars to their funding sources. So they've come back to a 45-day ask from the state. I still uncertain of how this is going to play out. I actually talked to Auditor Cinziano last night about 4:15. He is okay with the 45-day request. It just has not been approved. So it looks like Franklin County second half tax payments are going to be due somewhere around August 4th or 5th. Stay tuned for more information on that. The other big issue on a local level is, as many of you probably know, every 6 years, there is a full reappraisal, property value reappraisal that is required by the Ohio Revised Code. And every 3 years, there is the triennial update, the 3-year update. We have been engaged in these conversations, not only across the state. I will take a little bit of credit, and I shouldn't be taking credit, but I brought this to Ohio Realtors because Auditor Cinziano and Auditor George Kaitza brought this to me. And they are actually on separate pages. Between us, there's a small enough group here that I will tell you that. They are not on the same page as well. So of the 3-year update, Franklin, Delaware, Union, I believe, Licking, Hamilton, which is down in Cincinnati, there's 42 counties in the state of Ohio that are either in the full 6-year or the triennial update. So there are 42 of the 88 counties who are reassessing property values this year. Auditor Cinziano has brought this to us because he is concerned in Franklin County, the average property value is likely to increase somewhere near 20%. You will see some parts of the county that will see 30 to plus percent increase in value. In Delaware County, according to Auditor Kaitza, you're looking at more of a 12 to 15% increase across the board. Average, some areas in Dublin, Powell could see, that 30% number depending on where we live. There is a real concern about issuing tentative property values with an increase of 20 to 30% in July. Now, keep in mind, those tentative values are sent. I actually learned something yesterday on my call. You all are familiar with the informal hearing process, where homeowners can go in with an attorney or without an attorney and provide documentation on the informal process of what they believe their property is valued at. That is actually not standard practice across the state. Very few counties actually do that. There is no requirement that the informal process happen. So this is a long way of saying that Columbus Realtors has not taken a position on this. John and I have had some conversations about this, and we really need to probably speed up our process to consider this. So I want to go back to the basics of this. Tentative values would go out in July. The informals would probably happen in August or in August into September, and the new property value would go out later in the year, November, December, and those tax payments, property value tax payments, would be then due in arrears, as they always are. The request from Auditor Cinziano, I believe, is going to be to delay the triennial update by 1 year, so that you'll see the property value increase in the triennial update in 2021. Auditor Kaitza, and I'm probably giving you all a little bit too much information, so let's try to keep this somewhat inside baseball, is that he believes in the process, and that if people do want to challenge their value, that there's the informal process. And I think that that's actually probably the collective theory across the state amongst the auditors, because of the fact that there is no data right now to prove that property values are decreasing. The second point that a lot of these auditors, I know my colleague down in Cincinnati is also having with the Hamilton County auditor, is these are not 1 or 2 quarters. These are not property values based on 1 or 2 quarters in the last 3 years. They are based on the last 3 years. So there's a theory that the numbers are what the numbers are. Now, on the flip side of all of this is we don't know what the market's going to do. No one has a crystal ball. No one knows what's going to happen in June, July, August, September, et cetera, et cetera. Columbus Realtors has not taken a position on this, but there are conversations being had about what we could be or should be doing in terms of the reappraisal process. Sue, when one escrows their property taxes with their lenders, will the lenders also know of the delay in Franklin County? Yes, I believe so, Sue. I don't want to answer for the lenders, but if there were to be a delay right now, the second half tax payments. Is that what you're talking about, Sue? The second half tax payments? Yeah. They would know. There is no delay right now. It has to be approved by the state, but yes, they would know. Yep. So on the reappraisal process, sorry, I went back there. I just saw Sue's question. On the reappraisal process, we don't have an official position. The auditors themselves are not on the same page, as I've mentioned. So there is a concern from Ohio Realtors Public Policy Group that Ohio Realtors expends some political capital to ask for a delay, and the auditors then fight us. So we're working through this. We don't have an answer, but I just want you all to know that the conversation is being had about what the triennial process looks like. Any questions? I can drone on about local activities, but I don't want to take too much time. On a state level, a couple issues here that you all are familiar with, and I do want to address a couple issues. I'm gonna talk about the CARES Act here for a second because it does impact the state in one specific way. So the CARES Act, which was a $2.2 trillion package that was signed into law at the end of March, had 5 provisions in it in which states had to sign off on. One of those was unemployment, and specifically independent contractors. So as you all know, unemployment is administered by the states. Typically, only those who are W-2 employees have been eligible for unemployment. NAR lobbied hard. This is another win for NAR, and where the value of advocacy comes in is that independent contractors, including 1099, which many of you are, if not all of you are eligible for unemployment, as well as gig workers, the Uber, Lyfts, et cetera, et cetera. The governor signed off on those provisions to include those provisions into the state of Ohio. Independent contractors have never been eligible for unemployment in Ohio, which meant that the state of Ohio had to go find a vendor to build this system. That system is being built currently. I don't want to call it a dummy application but for lack of better words, the dummy application should be live today. I have not actually checked yet this morning. To get in line for independent contractors, 1099 independent contractors to receive unemployment in the state of Ohio. The funding will likely not happen until mid-May. And then it is all retroactive. It is all retroactive back to earlier this year. So 1099 independent contractors are eligible. I do want to talk about real estate as an essential service. Many of you know and are very active at the association, and you all know that, well, before I go there, real estate is an essential service. So we heard from a lot of our members, and we saw posts on social media that agents were in Central Ohio were opening doors and letting potential buyers in and standing on the porch, or were sitting in their cars or remaining outside. I got into a conversation, and I quickly deferred it and had them contact our CEO, John Geha, that someone tried to tell me that they just did not believe that if an agent was standing outside, that was unsupervised access, which then prompted Superintendent Ann Pettit's article that came out mid-month or late last month that did constitute unsupervised access. So I know I'm talking to one specific brokerage, so obviously, it is broker to broker, brokerage to brokerage in terms of how showings are handled. We actually received some complaints, few, maybe 5 or so, that real estate should not have been deemed essential. That as the pandemic and the unknowns and uncertainty of coronavirus were new a month and a half ago, that there is no reason that real estate should be deemed an essential service, and it's actually more of a public health hazard than anything. So we still see that as a win. We just cannot issue enough caution to our members to take the necessary steps for safe showings and social distancing. As Scott Williams, the Ohio Realtors CEO, eloquently said in one of his articles last month, that what the governor can give, the governor can taketh away. And that's, quite frankly, very well put. That just because we were deemed an essential service, I continue to ask the question to a lot of our members, and it's not for me to answer, but can we? Yes. Or can you? Yes. Should you? That is for you to determine the best practice and best showing, best methods moving forward. So yes, real estate was deemed an essential service, which we believe was a huge win for us. Part of House Bill 197, which was an emergency piece of legislation enacted by the Ohio House, which not only extended the Ohio primary date to this coming Tuesday. If you have not voted, you should vote by mail only. There will not be any in-person voting. But a huge win for the state and Ohio Realtors was that elected offices who impact real estate services, the auditor, treasurer, recorder, mapping offices, must remain open in some capacity. It was given to them to deem how they remain open, but it does require these public offices to remain open as well. I heard, which we raised to the Ohio Realtors Public Policy Group. I know they heard it as well, that they were worried about auditors and recorders just completely shutting their offices and the mapping offices. So, another huge win for Ohio Realtors in our advocacy efforts was passing a law that required these offices to remain open in some capacity. Any questions on the state issues? I think that covers what I wanted to talk about on the state issues. Let's move on to the federal issues. So as you probably have heard, there was a $2.2 trillion package passed on March 27th, signed into law March 28th by the president, that issued about $350 billion for funding for the Payment Protection Program, which is also commonly referred to as the PPP, and the EIDL, which is Economic Injury Disaster Loan of the SBA. So the PPP is what most of you are familiar with. There was a lot of uncertainty surrounding the PPP when it first came out, how it was being administered, who's eligible, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about the Payment Protection Program for a second. That program issued more loans in two weeks than it did in 2 years, the previous 2 years. They ran out of money of the $350 billion in about 2 weeks. There was some uncertainty about whether independent contractors, although it specifically stated in the bill that independent contractors were eligible, but it was called the Payment Protection Program. So we were told that independent contractors were applying by checking independent contractors, and lending institutions were denying them. So let me take another step back, and I apologize, I keep taking steps back. The PPP is backed by the SBA and the federal government, but those loans are issued through local SBA lending institutions. So if you want to apply for the Payment Protection Program, you must do so through a local lending institution. We were told that lenders were denying independent contractors because they didn't have payroll. So of the PPP, 75% of the loan must go to retain payroll. The whole idea is so that employers don't put folks on unemployment. They retain them as employees. We do know that there are large franchises. I do know that there are large franchises in Central Ohio that did apply for the PPP. I know independent contractors who applied for the PPP and they got them. The couple large franchises that I'm aware of, they were able to retain their administrative assistants and their licensed assistants as well. If they are W-2 employees, they were retained, thankfully, because of the PPP. We've also heard a lot of scuttlebutt about folks who have been denied and did not get the PPP, the Payment Protection Program. Last Thursday, we were set to have a panel, tape a panel with Shannon McGann, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs of NAR, Everett Waddell, who is the United States Small Business Administration District Director here in Columbus. John Geha was going to moderate it. We had an accountant on as well, and I think we were going to have a broker on. I got a call Thursday morning from Everett Waddell, who's the United States Small Business Administration District Director, who I've known forever, and he said, Brent, I can't go on camera. I can't talk about the PPP because there is no PPP to talk about. The money has completely dried up. The program is inactive, and I can't talk about something that hypothetically might come back. So as of last Thursday, there was no PPP. The Senate on Tuesday passed an additional $484 billion and $350 billion additional dollars to go specifically to the Payment Protection Program. The House passed that bill last night. So again, I have not had time yet this morning to check to see if the Payment Protection Program is up and running, but the PPP has been refunded by Congress. So to talk about it for a quick second, I don't want to bore you all because it can become very cumbersome. So this again is for independent contractors to pay payroll expenses or mortgage interest, rent, utilities. And it's 2.5 times the business's average monthly payroll, capped at $10 million. I don't believe that we're going to get to $10 million on this call. And it's a fixed interest rate of 1% and no payments for the first 6 months. So that's where we are with the PPP. Hopefully it's up and running. There's still some uncertainty about whether the lending institutions who are issuing these funds will allow those who applied but were denied because the program ran out of money will remain first in line in the queue, or if there will be a new line formed, a new queue, based on new applications of the refunding of the Payment Protection Program. So you might be asking yourself, can realtors apply for the PPP and unemployment? The answer is NAR has not found any language that prohibits that. They do believe that either unemployment or the SBA is going to catch on, that you are double dipping, not you, but there could be double dipping going on. And that is certainly not the intent of either program. What we have heard is that if a independent contractor applies for PPP and they receive the Payment Protection Program and their funds dry up through the PPP, they then could apply for unemployment through the state. The EIDL, which is another program I'm sure you have all heard about, this is a program for working capital. And so it can apply, businesses and independent contractors can pay fixed debts or expenses that can't be paid because of the disaster, the coronavirus impact of up to $15,000, or the $1,000 employee capped at $10,000. That's an interest rate, I believe, of 3.75, and it's a 30-year loan, but no payments for the first year. So the difference really is the EIDL really is for working capital, expenses that can't be paid, and the payment protection program is really to retain employees, and so the independent contractors are able to stay afloat. So I'm sure you've heard a lot about the companies who received the PPP who may or may not have needed it. That's not for me to determine. There's a lot of press about that. I do also want to talk quickly about the issues that NAR has faced, and we have also heard about locally in terms of forbearances. A forbearance does not allow someone the opportunity to not pay. A forbearance means that you should be working with your landlord, your tenant, your mortgage holder to work out payments. We received quite a few emails from members saying that the wording was confusing, and folks believe that, especially commercial property owners, that they were worried that tenants would just stop paying because of the forbearance, which has been a huge concern. And a forbearance obviously does not allow anyone not to pay. It's still a contract. It is still contractually obligated through a lease to pay. We've also heard a lot from our commercial members who say they just need cash flow immediately. NAR has been working very, very diligently on this in terms of making sure that we can help those institutions and our commercial property owners as needed. So that is a lot so far. The last couple of things I do want to talk about: the census. If you have not filled out your census, make sure you do. Not only does this talk about, does this impact our congressional representation, our members of Congress, and the number of congressional seats that we have. Ohio is actually expected to lose a congressional seat this year. So filling out your census is critically important if you're still working with your consumers. And it could be a great point of contact for you to reach out to your clients and having them fill out the census. There's about another $1 trillion that is of federal spending that is determined by the census. Ohio receives roughly $21 billion of that so far. So the census goes to help everything from transportation to affordable housing to programs like SNAP. So the census is obviously critical. Let's see, COREPAC. I talked at length about our advocacy wins on a local, state, and federal level. Those efforts are obviously able to be, those conversations and efforts are able to happen because of the relationships that we have built over many, many, many years. Andy Mills said it on our board of directors meeting the other day. What value would you put on your business still being conducted? Or what value, what would you lose if we were not able to be deemed an essential service and you were not able to continue your business? So what value do you put on business still happening is something you should consider in terms of COREPAC. So your investments matter, our relationships with our public and elected officials matter, and they're critical, especially in times like this. Last thing, I think I mentioned this, is voting. Make sure you vote by Tuesday. And then lastly, our COREPAC auction is going to look completely different this year. We're still working out the logistics, but there will be no COREPAC auction in May at St. Charles, obviously. But we will get back in touch with exactly what the plan is. So it's critical that our advocacy efforts stay strong, our relationships stay strong, and that we're able to not only advocate on behalf of our members, but the consumers. And I know Holly wanted me to hit on this as well. In Leadership Academy, I often talk about my background, I'm an Ohio guy. I grew up in Van Wert. I was in DC for about 5-6 years, maybe a little bit longer. And I've been in Columbus since 2008, 2009. I came from a mentality of where federal elections are everything. The president matters and Congress matters, and they do. I don't want to dismiss that at all. But what happens on a local level in our city halls, in our county administrative buildings with our auditor, our commissioners, our treasurers, our mayors, our city managers, and even our state house leaders, far outweighs and impacts your business on a day-to-day basis more than the federal government ever will. If we don't have water, clean water and sewer and trash pickup and streets, clean streets and all the essential services, basic human essential services, you don't have a business. We can talk about what our members of Congress and what our presidents do or don't do for us, but local elections matter. Everything is local. So get engaged if you're not engaged on the local level. I know that many of you, I can see your names, I can see your faces, are engaged. I just can't stress enough. And my mentality from 8 years ago has completely flipped, because I see the importance that these mayors, city managers, county commissioners, and other public and elected officials have on your day-to-day business. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. This is a presidential election year. This is a congressional election year. I never want to diminish that. Voting is important. Having your voice be heard is important. But the local level is where the rubber meets the road and is critical to what we do and what you do on a day-to-day basis. As you're driving throughout Central Ohio, representing buyers and sellers and tenants, you can see the impacts of local government. So
and
with
Brent,
that, I will shut up.
Where do people go to get that information about voting? Like, we know that it's by mail on Tuesday, but where are all of the statistics and all the things that are going to be on the ballot? Can you tell them where they can go to look and read and educate themselves about that?
Yeah, so if you want to look at your ballot, if you have not requested a ballot, you need to do so like today. Because it must be postmarked by Monday. So if you have not requested your absentee ballot for the primary, go to voteohio.gov. I'm going to make sure I'm going to sit here and Google this. I think it's voteohio.gov. You can actually look at voteohio.gov. Excuse me. And you can see you can track your ballot, and you can find your county board of elections. You'll be able to see your sample ballot, et cetera, et cetera. We typically do not, as an association, get involved in primaries. Mm-hmm. We're an incumbent-friendly organization. CORPAC is a truly bipartisan PAC, Political Action Committee, which we support candidates who support our issues and realtor and consumer issues. Many of you know that. You've heard me preach that. I can show you the numbers. We are a bipartisan PAC. Sue actually sits on the federal disbursement committee, so at the National Association of Realtors. So not only do we have our own process here on a local level in terms of our candidate questionnaire and candidate in-person interviews, and that's an entire process in and of itself about how we determine support for our local candidates. That same process is conducted at the state level for races as well, and then that same process is conducted at the national level. And Sue is part of those conversations and is a voting member as to which members of Congress we support, and that is also a 50-50. NAR RPAC is completely 50-50 as well. So in terms of where that information is to see your sample ballot, you can go to voteohio.gov. We do not issue, from an association side, a anything on the association side in terms of a sample ballot for our members, but we will in the general election.
Perfect, perfect. Thanks, Sue and Brent, for always doing stuff to make us aware of what's going on. Does anybody have any questions for Brent before we sign off for the day? I just want to say thank you so much, because it really is important for us all to do our part, and just anything that, one thing I did want to say, the email that you send out 3 on Thursday, if people aren't on that email list, how do they get on that list?
I will put my email in the chat.
Okay. Because really what this is he's, can you tell us what your 3 on Thursday is? Because I know a lot of people on this call already get it, but a lot of people have asked, how do they get it?
Yep. So I don't know when it was, maybe a year and a half ago at this point, 2 years ago, I'm not sure. I started this email, a government affairs update every Thursday morning. And it literally does come from me. It's not an automated email, or and I try to do 3 bullet points. I do 3 bullet points on every Thursday. 1 local, 1 state, and 1 federal. And sometimes they're 2 local and a federal. Sometimes they're 2 federal, or 2 state and a federal. Or but I try to keep it to 3 bullet points. Since March 20th or so, it's been about 3 or 20 for Thursday. I have temporarily suspended the 3. Dana Mack on the Dublin call, just on the Dublin Zoom an hour ago, told me, I appreciate your 20 for Thursdays now, because I am trying to keep everyone abreast of the information as I have it in conversations that are happening. So, long answer, it's a way to keep you all informed of what's going on a local, state, and federal level, specifically to advocacy and the issues that our industry is facing, as well as consumers. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And his email is in the chat.
And every once in a while, I throw in a gift card.
His email is in the chat, guys. So if you're not on it and you'd like to be on it, go ahead and do that. And I think at this point, I don't see any questions in there. So thank you so much.
Was I that thorough or that boring, Holly?
No, you were good. You're good. I mean, I think when we were in Leadership Academy and you told us, I never realized the importance of, I mean, I always voted locally, but I didn't realize until we sat in Leadership Academy and really talked about how it does impact, that it's not just the president that is important, it's everything. So, and I appreciate that you and Sue always keep us informed. And I think this year especially, everybody's a little frightened or, you know, scared or whatever. And just knowing that you guys are there, it really is very appreciated. Anybody else have anything to say? I guess with that, then thank you, Brent. We so appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Have a great
Good seeing
day.
you all.
Enjoy.